Good.
And well,
Go ahead.
welcome people to Metopia. This whether you're watching live at the actual convention or later on YouTube, glad to have you. This is the panel on ADA website design and marketing. My name is Beth Rimmels, and I'm here with Mike Roberts. We are both professional marketers. Specifically, I am a copywriter and a content manager, and our day jobs, we're dealing a lot with ADA, which we'll get into a second, but also relevant to this, I'm also a game designer and I'm also a game reviewer in World. You can find me on Twitter at Beth Rimmels, Rimmels, or at awesome, the number 8, followed by the letter S, RPG, or at Nworld as B Rimmels. And my reviews usually end up on the front page. Mike, introduce yourself.
Yes. Well, we did accidentally cut off our narrator. We do have a narrator on board who will be reading questions and getting back to us. So if anyone has any questions, there's someone who will feed that to us later on. Um, so yes, my name is Mike Roberts. I have been doing these panels with Beth now for I think the past 5 years, and we decided to up it from intro to web stuff for game designers and turn it into ADA compliance. I've worked in search engine optimization for at least a decade. I'm not even sure how long anymore that I've been doing this.
More than
Um,
10 years.
Beth would know she actually got me my first job in this field, and so yeah, 10 somewhere between like 10 and 12 years now I've been doing this. Um, and this year we wanted to do something a little bit different instead of the usual introduction to and basic stuff. Um, Along with some of that, we wanted to put in a more focus on inclusivity. I know that comes up a lot everywhere. It comes up a lot everywhere now, but especially in the gaming field, I'm sure there have been more than enough other talks about inclusivity. And when it comes to your website, there are also legal reasons that you want to be more inclusive. So it's not just about doing better for the sake of doing better. There's also good marketing and legal reasons that you need to consider these things nowadays.
Exactly. So just to kind of get everybody on board with what we're talking about accessibility, and the ADA refers to the Americans with Disabilities Act, which was actually passed a good while ago, back in the 90s. Um, and the original intent, because when the ADA was first passed, um, internet concerns were not really part of their planning for it. The Americans with Disabilities Act is a regulation to ensure equal access for customers with disabilities. So this is why, if you go into a public place, there will be a bathroom stall that is wider to accommodate a wheelchair. There will be ramps and doorways that are wide enough and things like that. Um, it technically says that no individual shall be discriminated against on the basis of disability in the full and equal enjoyment of goods, services, facilities, privileges, advantages, or accommodations of any place of public accommodation. Okay. So it's just basically making a level playing field. And that's a lovely intent. It's also good business because it means you can have more customers. So, what does this have to do with your website? Well, nowadays, everything, because courts have basically ruled over times that ADA provisions, the intent of them, obviously not necessarily wheelchair ramps on a website, but the intent of the ADA affects websites because nowadays so much of our world is done online. And there are absolute things that people need to do online. And so if a website is, inaccessible, well, then that is discriminating against people. And lots of big companies have been sued for lack of ADA compliance, including Netflix, Amazon, Target, Winn-Dixie, Estee Lauder, Bed Bath and Beyond, Fox News, and I can keep going with a big long list. And by the way, they have either settled or lost those cases. So it's not a situation of, oh, well, they got sued, but nothing's going to come of it. No, the courts are serious about accessibility. Why this is relevant to you is that the current phase of how this is rolling out for average people is that it is affecting smaller websites as well. It's not just people targeting the big ones. Um, and then in addition to that, there are states, and New York, California, and Florida are three of them, that allow financial penalties on businesses of any size. So being small doesn't necessarily protect you if your site is deemed inaccessible. And in some of these states, there have been live lawsuits. Specifically, people just, oh, this website, we're going to sue against it. And in fact, a former client of ours, our day job, they left, they went on to another company, and then came back to us because the website that other company designed violated ADA guidance, and they got hit with a lawsuit, and they came back to us to get their website fixed, so it would not be out of compliance with ADA standards. So being small doesn't protect you, and on the other side, of course, if people can use your website that is accessible, or at least doesn't have any of the big things that make it inaccessible, you can get more business. This is good for your bottom line. And the good thing is too is that a lot of the changes that you need to make aren't really that hard. They're very simple things to do. It's just certain things you have to keep in mind.
I
Um,
was going to point out from my side of the field where I'm working on page website stuff and content and things like that. There are a lot of things that we were already doing regularly because they're best practices that weren't created intending to conform to ADA compliance, but do conform to it. There are some basic things that we in our field just do normally for everyone's site that an average person might not know to do. Uh, but these basic things like alt text on an image. And I've talked about that in the 101 a whole bunch of times. A lot of people will make websites, throw these incredible photos on there, but for organic traffic, Google can't see what that picture is. But for ADA, someone who has vision impairment might not be able to see that image that well. Where and then including alt text helps with Google, but it also helps with screen readers for vision impairment. So people that might still want your game, might still want your product, but can't see this incredible art you have on your website, can at least have their screen reader explain what it is to them so they can still enjoy your content without needing to be able to see it as well. So something as basic as that goes a long way in helping with ADA.
Again, these things don't have to be like physical stores when they had to start complying with ADA regulations. Sort of complained about, I have to change my doors or I have to have ramp installed. That costs me money. A lot of the things for your website are just simple different design choices. So it's not costing you any more. If you're designing a website or redesigning a website, it just affects what you're choosing. And so it's not changing really the cost of that. Um, and speaking of alt text, Twitter has facilitated that when you upload a photograph to it, you can add alt text to that image. And one of the very common, and it has a free plan. Buffer is a social media scheduling tool that was originally designed for Twitter, works for other social media platforms as well. It upgraded its service, so you get this with the free basic service. Of that, again, when you're uploading an image, you can click and add a description to that image that will, it's little alt text, and it's there. So this way, then somebody can't see the image or just can't see it well, they can get that little screen reader or the little text description that says image of a child holding a cat or whatever the image is.
Oh,
So mhm.
before we get too far in, we have to put in a little disclaimer just in case
Oh
that
yes,
none of this constitutes any legal advice. This is all purely informational.
yes, we are
We're,
not lawyers.
we're not lawyers. We are not we don't have like a background in certifications on a legal level for ADA or anything like that. This is all just stuff from our day job that that we have to do that is important for you, which could have legal ramifications, but this is all just purely informational. Just want to get that
We
in before we're like an hour in.
we are not lawyers and we do not play them on TV. However, by the way, you can find tools online that are free that you can give the URL of your website to, and they can give you a score for ADA accessibility.
Yeah,
So,
the one of the big ones that people might have heard of or pops up a lot more. Google has a tool called Lighthouse. Um, I don't remember what the URL is off the top of my head, but if you just type in Google Lighthouse,
find it.
Lighthouse does give you accessibility scores on top of other things. So that's a good tool from a big company that doesn't necessarily want you to get sued because, well, they want you to add money and other stuff. So they're not going to purposefully steer you wrong. So it is trustworthy to a level, and worth looking into if you want to see how you stack up already before putting time and energy into the work for changes.
Exactly.
The link is in the chat.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Abby. That's wonderful. So let's go into some examples of what makes a website either inaccessible or, even if it's not fully inaccessible, more difficult on some of your clients and or potential buyers than it really needs to be. And one of my personal pet peeves, because it has been a popular design trend for a long time, is websites with a white background and all of the text on the website is light gray in a skinny font.
If you didn't
You
bring
have
that up first, I was going to interject that one because that was the first thing on the top of my head. But I'm like, I just want to complain about this, but Beth will get to it.
it is the bane of my existence. It's a design trend and that is very popular. I keep waiting for this design trend to go away and be replaced by something else. It hasn't yet. It's been around way too long. And by the way, this isn't just necessarily a trend that's difficult for people who actively have low vision. People with any kind of aging eyes can hate this design trend because there's just not enough contrast to be able to read and see. And contrast is one of the key words when it comes to website design that is going to be more accessible.
I do want to point out there are a handful of tools for that because of the whole
Mhm.
color contrast thing. Um, I don't want to get into like what the ratios are or anything like
Oh
that
yeah.
because there are specific ratios that they have in the was it the web content accessibility guide
Hmm.
that's supposed to help you with this. But there are some tools out there. Um, One of the ones that I have used, it's coolors.co. It's COOLORS.co. They have a contrast checker, so you can actually put in like the hex code of your background color and the hex code of your text color, and it will tell you how readable, how good that contrast is for the sake of people with vision issues.
Hmm. And also to keep in mind nowadays, a lot of people, even if they don't necessarily have vision issues, are using dark mode on their phones, or they're using color inversion. And in fact, the latest Apple devices and things that can update to the latest iOS have both a classic invert and a smart invert. Don't ask me to explain the difference between them. I'm still playing with the settings. But a lot of people just use those just because it's easier on the eyes, or it's just, easier for them to see, particularly if they're depending upon the screen size they're dealing with. So keep in mind the things that you're doing to make your website a bit more accessible like this. It's not just helping people with an actual disability. It's just broadening the base of people who can easily find and read your content. And that's a win. Because if more than once, if I've gone to a website and it's like, I can't read any of that. That font is too tiny and it's too skinny and it's too pale and I'm out here. I will find a different site. And you don't want to lose market share that way.
One of the audience members chimed in to say that as a person with dyslexia,
Mhm.
the trend is also very hard on them. And so it's not just physical disabilities, it's also neurodivergence that is affected by this.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Uh, Yeah,
There have been some attempts over the years to create fonts that were better for people with dyslexia as well. I don't know how well all of those work, but there are people that have been putting time and energy into creating fonts that are easier for people with a variety of ailments or disabilities or what have you to make their lives easier as well. Um, I mean, font choice is something that does come up with ADA. It's not as super specific. They don't say like here are the five fonts that work best for sites. It's more of a is this visually appealing and can it easily be read?
right.
But that is something worth looking into. Unless you have a proprietary font that you have designed for your game, you really want that on there. For the basic information, though, there might be web accessible fonts that are more easily readable for people with a wider range of issues with reading or seeing. Yeah.
Mhm. Which, by the way, that's just to drop back a little bit to a tiny bit of background to put things in context. One of the complications right now is that, um, unlike with a physical building, where there are now tried and true standards of what makes that building inaccessible and therefore violating ADA guidelines, we don't have as quite clear cut guidelines for internet and websites. As I said, there have been numerous court cases that have gone all the way and have upheld that yes, they do have to be accessible and they should not be violating the ADA, and that ADA applies to websites. However, the Department of Justice has not issued clear guidelines for what that means. They have referred people to the World Wide Web Consortium, also known as W3C, Web Accessibility Initiative, also known as WAI, and their Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, which is also known as WCAC. I know it's all mouthfuls of jargon. So they've basically reaffirmed that yes, this is important. Yes, this is part of this legal standard, but they haven't issued guidelines to say what is and what isn't. And in fact, and in today's world, bipartisanship really doesn't exist. But in as recently as June 2018, a bipartisan group of 103 members of Congress basically petitioned the Department of Justice, it was then under Jeff Sessions, to please make clear guidelines so this way then businesses can more easily follow those guidelines and to avoid frivolous lawsuits. And then later on, a year later, a group of Republican senators also petitioned the Department of Justice to please clarify the guidelines for ADA compliance for websites. And they haven't. Um, they did later on come up to say that Title III of the ADA applies to websites, and they did confirm that. They were asked to adopt the WCAG 2.0 guidelines. They referred to those guidelines without saying that is how you follow it. The current Department of Justice basically has a lot on its plate. They are looking at the issue as to what to issue, but they haven't gone to it yet. So that adds layers of confusion of that there just isn't a clear-cut list like there is for a physical building. However, like I said, if you look at those guidelines, and in fact, like the website is www.w3.org/WAI/WCAG21. Or at least that was the last set of guidelines that I found.
It's in the chat.
Okay, awesome. You can get more guidance on this. That said, there are things that if you think about, and if you can find a website designer who is versed in accessible design, that's fabulous. As I said, it shouldn't cost you any more. It's just a question of design choices. So again, avoid these skinny gray fonts on a white background. If you have a video embedded on your website, especially on the first page, do not set it to autoplay. That used to be a big thing for a while on the internet. If that the minute you came to a website, music would play or video would play. The problem with that is it interferes with screen readers because the person then is either that is blocking the screen reader or they're getting the mix of the two, and then they can't find what they need on the screen to even get to it to turn it off. So leave those things as default that they're there, that you have to click to put them on. Blinking text is bad. And that's not just a reading issue. Blinking things can create a strobe effect that can actually trigger seizures in some people. You don't want to do that.
I would like to point out screen readers, not as uncommon as some people might think. If you have a Windows computer, it is already baked into the operating system.
Mhm.
They have accessibility tools right there. Any person can turn on a screen reader. So these are not a rare thing. This is not like a 1 in a million chance someone will pop up with a screen reader and need to be able to see your site. These are actually a very common tool used by a wide range of people.
Facebook apps. The Facebook app has built into it that you can have posts read to you. Apple has excellent accessibility tools just built into the phone. You just have to turn them on. And that's just a click to do. And again, sometimes you just use them just because it's convenient. Sunlight on a screen sometimes can be hard to make it reading your phone if you're outdoors. And I was trying to actually show a post to somebody, and we were both outdoors, and it's like, we have glasses on, neither of us can quite read this. And I just pressed the thing to make it read it to us. It was so much easier than dealing with sunlight on the screen of my phone and all the weirdness that that does. Let's see here. What else? Mike, do you want to talk about GMB and accessibility?
B&B and accessibility. Um,
Well, like if
I mean,
nothing else,
that'll,
the buttons.
I was going to say for GMB, if anything, that's going to more matter for anyone who might have a game store over someone who has a website just for their game. So if there are
Mhm.
any like local game store owners, um, GMB, Google My Business, actually super useful for letting people know that your store is accessible. Love that they added that in. That's a little bit less about ADA than for websites and more about ADA just in general.
Well, it's accessible marketing, I would say. So.
Yeah, I just love that they actually added that stuff now. So if you do actually have a local store, you have somewhere people show up to, there is an entire list of accessibility options you can put down on your business to let people know that you have things like ramps or wheelchair accessible bathrooms, or that you are a trans safe space, or you are a woman-led business, or I mean, there's just a wide range of stuff that they have added, especially in the past year, that I absolutely love that they did not before. Trying to think, GMB less of a worry with ADA for websites, I think, at this moment, but still, it's super useful.
Well, but also if you do have it set properly, though, people can just press the call button. They're not having to fumble with things.
Oh, that's true. And yeah, I'm trying to think. There's a wide range of options now, not just for click to call, but they do have options to directly text someone as
Hmm.
well. So if someone isn't able to make that phone call, either if they have hearing loss and it's easier for them to do, text or text to speech or anything like that, there's messaging options that are built in now that you can turn on. Um, Obviously, the click to call button, so it's just the one button press and your phone will call them for you, so you don't have to worry about needing to type everything in yourself if you have any, manual dexterity problems. Um, so yeah, all of those would be super useful for really any business.
Right.
You're not gonna get sued under ADA if your GMB listing doesn't, but really that's more of a do better because we should do better sort of thing that you might want to include.
Do
Um,
better, so we should do better, and also too, like I said, it makes it easier for people to spend money with you.
since you had mentioned video before, one thing that immediately pops into my head, I do have some hearing loss, mostly on my right side, but I've gotten super used to for most of my life having captions on
Hmm.
everything. So there are times that I will just miss things, and I need that. Um, when you're putting a video on your website, please add captions. Uh, add captions. ADA also does suggest, or actually, it's the WCAG does suggest also having a transcript available somewhere. Um, it's probably a little bit less common. You won't really see it as often on a lot of websites. But if you have a video embedded on your site, especially if it's one you yourself have made for your game, for your product, for whatever it is, and I know on YouTube, this was a very easy thing to do, where you could go in, choose the time frame, type
Mhm.
everything out. Please do that. That is one of the things that they look at for ADA compliance, that your videos do have closed captions, that you potentially have transcripts, uh, and that these things are actually readable and accessible. People can find them on your site. So please, closed captions are wonderful. They make my life so much easier.
Well,
I'm
since okay, yes. Go ahead, Daddy.
just a question from me as a user. We're using a captioning software for this web captioner, and it's mediocre.
Mhm.
What is your experience with the YouTube captioning system? Because I know they've introduced in the last year and a half, some more robust auto captioning options.
You're reading my mind because that's actually what I was just getting ready to talk about.
Awesome.
So the telepathy is working. Um, I haven't used it since they first introduced it, so it may have been refined since then. I actually need to go back in and play. But I did use it for a couple videos, and if I remember correctly at the time, I actually recorded the videos as a Facebook Live and then imported them into YouTube and still was able to run them through the captioner. So you're not just tied to YouTube for this, you can also upload things and do that. The captioner at that time, like I said, they may have improved and refined even more, was pretty darn good. Now, that said, you want to look at the captions before you do the final, attaching of them, because there will be things they will make a mistake with. Um, but it's a lot faster than trying to do a transcription yourself or do captioning yourself. And it's a lot easier to just fix the things where the captioner misunderstood the person's accent, like mine, which is weird, um, than to try and do this manually. But yeah, it's a pretty darn good tool.
Yeah, I used to hate the auto captions on YouTube. I used to absolutely hate them. They were awful. They have gotten a lot better, but like Beth had pointed out, go back through them. There's going to be words that they just don't catch, that they misspell, that they give some hilarious alternative to um, instead of the correct word. But that's going to happen anywhere. Even sometimes the best captions on Netflix will get words horribly wrong. Um, so a misspelled word or wrong word here and there isn't going to kill anyone. But with YouTube, you have the option to go back in and fix those mistakes and tweak it. One thing I do sometimes run across is the timing will be kind of funny, especially if
Mm.
people are talking quickly, where the captions don't quite line up right. So this one will be good, and then the next one just blinks past, and you're like, okay, what did that say? I have to scroll back, pause, try to read. So just make sure that the timing works right for your captions as well, to make life a little bit easier for people reading them. But yeah, the YouTube auto captions have gotten better. Yeah.
Well, the other thing when dealing with website design, like I said, gray fonts on white backgrounds are not the only thing. It's also a question of, I like Mike said before, combinations of colors, and also think about people who are colorblind,
Mhm.
because what looks to you like it's a great combination of colors, especially if you have buttons for people to press and what they're pressing depends upon the color. If you pick the wrong colors, a colorblind person isn't going to know what to do. The online, the web consortium guidelines for that is, don't just have the buttons be determined by color. Also put text on them that people can see. Um, or have captioned underneath of it if you're dealing with concerns about screen readers. But if it's just oh, press green to go forward or red to go back or something like that, well, people with red green color blindness aren't going to know which one is which.
Yeah.
So again,
For years now, for design reasons, even before all of this stuff became that much more important for us, I have a tool called Color Oracle,
mhm,
and really it's a design tool, and it just sort of it puts an overlay on your computer that changes the colors to approximate three different types of color blindness.
mhm.
So if you're trying to come up with a design, if you're looking at the layout of your site and your buttons and all of that, and you want to make sure that they're still going to be readable, Color Oracle is a nice, simple, free tool that exists out there that will just change the colors and let you see if you could even read it yourself if you had form of color blindness. Super useful tool for anyone doing any form of design, whether it's website stuff or even if it's print stuff. If you are trying to create business cards or flyers for something as well, or signage for your table at a gaming convention or whatever it is. This is a super useful tool just to make sure everyone would be able to read it. Um, I know this had become I actually sat in a panel once a couple of years ago that did mention this issues with like token colors and things like
Mhm.
that and color blindness. That it's important that you differentiate them in a certain way, and you can't just say like, oh, this purple goes on these brown squares or whatever, because some people will look at that and be like, which is the purple and which is the brown? And
Mhm.
so Color Oracle, very useful tool to check that. On top of the regular color contrast stuff as well. That does get a little screwy then, trying to figure out proper color contrast for color blindness, but that's that is not something currently that they are going to look at. They're not going to make sure that your color contrast has the correct ratios for every form of vision. Uh, but it's still a useful thing to have on your site for people that have vision problems, and it will come up occasionally.
The other thing is, again, it is a little tricky to design to cover the entire spectrum of that, that you have proper contrast, that you're not adversely, causing problems for people color blindness, and everything else. You do the best you can trying to thread the needle between all these different things. And color inversion is also another issue I'm going to get to in 1 second. Um, but the thing is, if your website is trying to comply and it is obvious that it is trying to comply, that carries a lot of favor if somebody does try to complain, as opposed to the websites that aren't trying to do anything and quite the contrary, are designing for things almost to be aggressive against people with issues. One thing that I'm hating right now is that I'm seeing the design, just as I hate the gray on white design trend, I'm now seeing a new design trend for logos of black on dark red. And it's like, great, they went from one extreme to the other awful extreme because black on dark red is very hard to read. And in fact, a trick if you wanted to give handouts of something that you didn't want people to make copies of the handouts was use red paper with black ink on it because it would photocopy as just black or just, you know, dark grays and everything else. So, gee, that's a lovely design trend for inaccessibility. Graphic designers, sometimes I swear they just hate anybody with vision issues. Um, but the other type of free tester, and you can again find these if you look on the internet. You can also find websites with free tools to test your website for color inversion, not just the contrast, but the inversion. Because as I said before, a lot of people will use besides dark mode, like if their device isn't set up with a dark mode or the app they're using, sometimes they can set their device to invert colors because then the white background becomes black and the black layering becomes white, which is much easier to do. But this is where, depending upon your design choices, color inversion, which is designed to help, sometimes doesn't work out as well. So, for example, that white background with the pale gray fonts becomes a gray font on a black background in the color if you're using a color inversion tool. So it's still hard to read because I have run into that. Oy vey. It's a problem. But like I said, there are free tools out there where you can test your page to see how it looks for invert colors. I was actually checking a page website that was designed at our day job, and my first thought for the given design was that, oh, this is going to be a problem when they run through a color inverter because I'm seeing the contrast issue, but I bet it's even worse when you invert it. Well, actually, I was wrong because when they invert the colors, and that's basically doing the switching the color that's there for its opposite in the color wheel. So like blue becomes orange and things like that. And again, shading matters and all these sort of things. But when I ran it through an inverter, it was fine because just so happened that the color combination what it inverted to was very readable. Now, its original design, not as much. So I had to explain that to the graphic designers at work. Um, that's like, okay, can you tweak this color combination's good when you invert it, but for the base level, your contrast isn't good enough. Can you increase the contrast and then you should be set. But like, there's lots of free tools for all these things on the internet. Something else too, when you're doing website design, sometimes a website will be designed that the proportions are locked. So if the screen is like this, you can't, you know, do your little expand gesture to make the size bigger. Sometimes for design reasons, there are purposes for that, but realize that that also is going to limit people because if the font you're choosing or the way that font is showing up on their device, especially a phone, which tends to have a smaller screen than a tablet or a computer, um, you know, my default is to just, push everything and make it bigger. When that website is designed so that those proportions are locked, I can't, which means your website is much less useful to me.
That lets me bring up the font button. I think
I
everyone
just
has
go ahead.
probably seen that now. I assumed you were heading that way.
Yep, go for it.
I mean, personally, that one always bugged me a little bit because I could just sort of scroll and zoom, but
Hmm.
but that's not designed for me. That's
Hmm.
designed for other people. There is a good reason to have those, especially when you get into a spot like that, where for design reasons the resolution is locked.
Hmm.
You then have this little three letters. You might see them on the top of a lot of sites where they have like a small letter, a medium, and a big,
Usually
which
they're A.
allows. Yeah, I'm pretty sure they're almost always an A. I don't know why that was chosen to be the letter of choice for this, but um, that one, if you can't pinch and zoom, or if you can't scroll and zoom, you can't change the resolution. Uh, People will add that tool onto a website, so that way you can just click this and increase the size of the font on the page without destroying the entire layout and having things get all screwy or the formatting getting messed up. So that um, I'm not sure if it comes stock on any specific website building platforms. Like, I'm not sure if it's actually stock on a Wix or a WordPress or anything like that. But there are definitely plugins that are free that are available for this that allow you to add the font size changing on your site for people that need to be able to read stuff. Um, because I work a lot in mobile responsive websites, I do also need to point out that two sentences on a cell phone looks like an entire paragraph. Once you start sizing things up, that looks even crazier. So you have to be a little bit more aware of how much you're writing. Um, you might have a wonderful reason to have a 7 sentence paragraph on your homepage, but once someone has to start reading that on their phone and then increasing font sizes, all of a sudden it looks like they're trying to read A Song of Ice and Fire and it just scrolls on forever and then people just leave. Um, so be mindful of the amount of content. Break it up a little bit more to make life easier for people to read, especially when they have to increase font sizes to read it more easily.
Right. Now, when it comes to marketing, you may be somewhat trapped by the platform, especially for social media marketing, because You can't pick the background colors for Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or whatever it is. That said, there are things that you can do to make your posts, tweets, whatever, um, a little bit friendlier, a little bit more accessible. And same goes with if you're doing ads on those platforms. So, for example, do not do what a friend of mine did. Because again, you want to think in terms of screen readers. A lot of times people, if they're doing, and again, let's talk, for example, with like a Facebook post or a Facebook ad, they'll have a real pretty graphic that may or may not be a link post, which means that, you know, when you click it, it takes you elsewhere. Um, but they'll have a really pretty graphic. If all of the information that you are promoting is in that graphic, and no place else, that there's no real body text with that poster ad. Again, you're making it more difficult for someone who has accessibility issues to interact with that post because a screen a screen reader is not going to be able to tell them the details of your event or whatever it is that you're promoting. Um, so say you're promoting Metatopia here. Fine, we can have the great graphic, and Metatopia was lovely with us this year and made these lovely graphics for us. Um, when I did a post for it, I put in the post the description of, you know, hi, you know, join me and, you know, this person at this panel at this time, because then somebody can use the screen reader feature to get that information if they can't necessarily see that graphic. Okay. So little things like that will help make, you know, your marketing. So this way, then if that's going out as an ad, you know, like I said, their screen reader can read them the body text that's with it because they can't necessarily get all those details off the image. Do not do what a friend of mine did. She was promoting an event of hers, and she actually bought a Facebook ad to promote this event. Okay, so yay, she wanted to get word out for it. Except what she did was she took a graphic of herself. It was a lovely photograph of herself, you know, smiling, looking wonderful, and had a graphic designer put the details of the event on the graphic. So it was, you know, this person speaking at this time on this topic, blah, 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 and put the website URL on the graphic, and then had somebody turn that into a GIF or GIF. So flat image, but it had like a twinkling star background on it. And it was not tied to a link of any kind. And there was no body text. And she turned this into an ad. And so, and everything for where you're supposed to go to for the website was just way too small. And because it was a GIF, clicking it, I couldn't even click the image and make the image bigger to try and see what it was, because that just gave me the animation with the twinkling effect. So I couldn't tell where the heck her thing was, and there was nothing there to even click and take you to it. So it's very pretty and utterly impractical. And anybody who interacted with that, first of all, if you did see what the link was, you then had to go someplace else and type in that link and try and remember what this link was. It was just a complete design fail that even regular people, you know, were having problems with, you know, how do I get to this event that you're doing, that you're promoting? And it was utterly inaccessible because there was nothing to click. There was nothing a screen reader to grab. There was nothing you could expand. It was just, wow, this is pretty and utterly useless to people. So don't do that.
That is something similar that drives me crazy a lot of times. Luckily now we have wonderful designers at our job who actually listen when we tell them about things that are necessary for social media and SEO. But we have in the past had issues, or when a new client comes in, they'll have that wonderful splash image at the top of their page, and it looks great, and they'll have all of this. You know, maybe they'll have who they are, or a little bit of their history, or some information, and all of that's actually an image. And it looks nice. And if you don't have any visual impairment, yeah, you can see that and read it, but it's an image. The text isn't actually text. There's nothing for a screen reader to grab. There's nothing for Google or Bing to crawl to know what any of that is because you've hidden it inside a picture. It's not
Mm-hmm.
text anymore. Please make it text. You can have your wonderful picture, but just put the text over it. There, you can. There's so many tools that let you create like a box or a frame, so you can have the text in there, and also that way you can resize if someone needs to resize their screen or resize their font. And I see that so often. People will be like, "Oh, look at this great splash image at the top of our homepage, and all this text and information, wonderful stuff." And it's like, yeah, that's great, but there's so many people that cannot access that information. Please present it differently.
Right.
I have a question on that front. This
Mm-hmm.
is like Avi's curiosity, semi-omniscient narrator speaking here. Um, I know that you can embed metadata into an image file.
Mm-hmm.
Can you have your graphic designer embed the alt text in the image so that screen readers automatically pull that up, or is that beyond our current capacity?
It depends upon the platform that the site is built on, as to whether that information will transfer in the media library to the page. Um, but the easiest way to check, if you're on a laptop, right click view page source, and then you can see what information is available there. When you're designing the page, normally when I'm working on a page like that, I like to use classic editors that show me all of the HTML and all the tags there. But most most platforms that you can build sites on now, when you go to attach media to the page or place media somewhere on the page, usually it gives you that little form fill of what's the title of the image, what alt text do you want. Usually you can put all that stuff in beforehand and not have to worry about it. Um, but depending upon the platform, when you first upload the image, not all that metadata will come through. So you just have to double check,
Got
and
it.
sometimes you have to add it in. Sometimes it'll be there. Um, it really depends.
So here's a
There's
specific, going back to the graphic that Beth mentioned, where she actually took the text and put it in the, I posted 71 of those in an hour the other day,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so I was powering through them, and it didn't even occur to me to take the text and put it in the actual post. I had a cut and paste, and then I was sticking the post in. And it sounds like really you have to know your platform and pay attention to your platform in order to get to know whether or not there are shortcuts for that. Yes?
Yes, I mean, on Facebook, I don't think Facebook's gonna pick up any of that, metadata. You're just gonna have to paste into the post. I would
Excellent.
post the graphic yeah, post the graphic first, and then post the text and any link with it, because if you do the link first, it becomes a link post, and then it's gonna grab the graphic from that link.
Oh, that's useful
So
to know. Thank you.
yeah, that's a sequencing thing. So if you want image to show first, add the image first, then add the link and body text. If you primarily want it to go over to the link, then you do it the other way. Um, but yeah, and yeah, kind of the same with Twitter. I use a Twitter scheduler, so I don't necessarily do the stuff live in Twitter. So I just
Right.
use a scheduler, and again, so I'm just uploading the graphic and then pasting into the tweet.
yeah.
All right, we
uh,
are at we're just about at 10 minutes. Mike, go ahead, and then I have a question from the audience for you.
Mhm.
okay. I mean, I was just gonna say, with respects to Google My Business, since that we did mention that a little bit earlier. If you're posting an image like that has tons of text inside of it, a lot of times Google My Business will actually just reject that post, because they want the content to actually be in the written portion of the post. You can have some words in there, especially if you have a sale or whatever information, but usually you keep that really concise and then put the actual information in the body of the post, so that way Google My Business doesn't just reject it for you trying to force too much text into an image like that.
Okay, useful to know. So converting PowerPoint slides over to graphics for advertising, not your best plan.
Not necessarily that it's a bad thing, it's just that if you can, and again, it's gonna kind of depend upon the platform and where you're doing it. If you can include some body text somewhere that a screen reader or such can grab, that makes it better.
Excellent.
Like I said, it's going to depend a little bit upon the platform.
I appreciate the applied information. Thank you very much. Um, I'm Kevin. Kevin says, how do we prioritize conflicting accommodations? For example, using colors to make sections easier to read versus making sure all the colors work for different visions.
Yeah, that's the trick, isn't it?
Dilemma.
Yeah,
That's where you need a
that's
good designer.
that's kind of the problem most people in our field have been running into with something like this, because there are no clear 100% set guidelines of you must do XYZ, and a lot of it right now is trial and error and trying to just do as best as you can. um, it's really hard to say anything definitive there. If you know your audience, then that helps. If you know what demographics you tend to have, obviously work towards whatever issues, disabilities they might have that need these workarounds. But you can't do everything for everyone. Otherwise, you're going to be spinning your wheels forever and drive yourself crazy. So uh, just try to do enough and try to be as good as you can, but don't worry if you can't do perfectly by everyone.
I would modify the statement if you can't do everything for everyone perfectly 100% of the time. Um, so sometimes it is threading a needle and you're just doing the best you can. So it's not perfect for this and this, but you're doing the best you can. Good graphic designer who is, trained in these things can do a lot, but even just running through, like I said, the free tools and just trying to get to the best result that will benefit the most people. Like I said, it won't be perfect, but you just kind of do the best you can for the moment until they give us clear guidelines of that this is the pecking order. Yes. Any other questions?
That was the last of the questions that we've had so far. So we have 7 minutes for you to make any last points and tell people where to find you on social media.
Last points, like I said, do the best you can. Don't let the fact that it can't be perfect for 100% of everybody's situations deter you from doing anything, because that could get you slapped with a lawsuit if the wrong person, decides to sue your website. Um, if you're trying to do something, that tends to go in your favor, especially with the conflicting guidelines nowadays, or rather unclear guidelines nowadays. So try to do something. And again, like I said, it's just more about design choices. This doesn't have to cost you more. Just try to think in terms of what's going to make it the best for as many people as possible. You know.
I think the last points I would probably bring up, if you've ever sat in on our other panels, our like general marketing and intro to websites and stuff like that, a lot of the basic stuff we bring up there is still important here and will help with ADA. So I've talked a lot in the past about, have decent titles on your pages and write a meta description that actually tells you what the page is about, and alt text on images and things like that. All of those things which you already need for organic traffic and to be found in search engines are things that do translate into ADA, because
Mhm.
those screen readers and other tools are going to read the title of the page. They're going to be able to show people the description of the content. Any of the times I've brought up things like in SEO, people say content is king. It's just been sort of a catchphrase for like 20 years now. Content is important. In recent years, it's more about writing in a more natural tone and answering people's questions. Um, so when you're doing content, having header tags that make sense will help structure information for screen readers, will help structure information in a way that is useful for ADA. So all of those basic things that we've talked about in other panels that are good for being found online are also things that will help with ADA and inclusivity. So start with the basics, work from there, and then yeah, if you're changing up the design of your site and need to figure out colors, there's a lot of great tools out there that are free that can help you out. And also finding a great designer who is there to help you and work with you, as opposed to designers that have their style set already and don't care. Find a good designer. A good designer will go a long way in doing this for you.
Also, too, if you find a good designer who maybe isn't necessarily already versed in accessibility but willing to learn, that also works too. Because again, this is still, as much as it's out there, it's also still not ubiquitous. So ask questions if you're interviewing designers. Like I said, there's a lot of free material out there that they can use and learn and improve their skills. And like I said, it helps protect your business. It endears you to your clients, and it can, avoid you losing business because, people just don't find your website accessible. So thank you very much, everybody who sent questions and everybody who found this useful. I hope you did. Again, my name is Beth Rimmels. I am a game designer. I'm a professional marketer, as relevant to this panel. And I'm also a game reviewer for N-World. You can find me at N-World at B Rimmels. You can find me on Twitter at Beth Rimmels, Rimmels. And my dedicated Twitter account for gaming is at awesome, the number 8, followed by the letter S, RPG. So at awesome 8, yeah, tongue tied, at awesome 8 RPG.
And I can't be found on social media for business purposes. I don't have a business Twitter or a business Facebook at the moment. So if you want to get a hold of me for any reason, you know what? Email Beth. Bug Beth. She'll get a hold of me. I've been friends with her for like 15 years, so she can take my email for now. Also, she probably knows the answer also. So if it's anything you think you want to ask me, Beth probably knows it too. You can ask her first, and if she doesn't, she'll check with me.
All right. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you to our panelists for bringing their expertise to this session. And thank you, audience members.